I'm Shannon, and today I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. Today, I am so excited. We're going to be talking about It Will Just Be Us by Kaplan. I got this book for Christmas after my friend here on YouTube, Kim, sent me a blurb where she was like, this sounds like it would be right up your alley. And boy, was it. I loved this book so much. Now, if you've been around my channel for a while, you know I love scary stories. You know I love haunted house stories. It's my favorite kind of scary story, and there are so many great ones. It's just one that I love. I love getting lost in a haunted house story. But you guys, this book scared me. I mean, it chilled me to the bone. There were times I had to put this book down because I was reading it at night and I was in bed terrified. And I feel like that's not something I can really say a lot of. You know, a good scary book will get under your skin, but not a lot truly scare you. This truly scared me. This woman is an amazing writer. I can't wait to see what she comes out with next because this was so good. So what we'll do is I'll give you a brief sort of review about it, and then we'll get more into some spoiler type discussion. But I will warn you before we get into the spoilers because I do not want to ruin anything for anybody. So this book is about a woman named Sam. She ends up moving back to her family home after an incident where she is mugged, and it really scares her. So she ends up moving back home. Her mom still lives in that home. This home has been in their family for generations. So her mom still lives there. She moves back home. Shortly thereafter, her sister Elizabeth also moves back home. Elizabeth is pregnant. Her and her husband are having some difficulties, and Elizabeth just wants to sort of get away from him for a while, figure her stuff out, figure out what she wants to do next. So the three of them are sort of back home now in this house. Now this house is perhaps the scariest house I've ever spent time in. It's so viscerally haunted. You can walk through the house and you can visually see memories playing out in front of you. Memories from your old childhood. Memories from generations that came before you. And it's all very bone-chilling, just the way it's described. There's one point fairly early on in the book where one of them is screaming. Yelling, screaming about something. And one of the other ones tells them, stop, don't do that, because I don't want to hear that echoed in the future as a memory, as a haunting in the house. And that chilled me. So what begins to happen is Sam begins to see the ghost of a little boy. She sees him at different ages. Now's probably a good time to tell you that there are two scenes in this book in which a young child hurts an animal. In one instance, it's a bird. In another instance, it's a frog. And those scenes are very, very difficult to read. And I know for some people that's a no, that's a deal breaker. So I just want to let you know that those scenes are in here so that if that's something that you don't want to read, you avoid it. And my goodness, those scenes are horrifying. So anyway, she's seeing the ghost of this little boy. And he's extra scary because he doesn't really have a face. He has a head, of course, but the features of his face aren't really defined at all. And she sees him at different ages throughout the house, and she can't place him. You know, having grown up in the house, she figures she's seen pretty much every ghost that would be in the house. And so at one point, she's after having seen him a few times, she sees him again upstairs by the bedrooms, and he's standing outside her sister's bedroom, and she sees that he's holding a knife. And she gets very scared, and so she starts backing up to go to her bedroom, not wanting to take her eyes off of him. And she goes into her room and she closes the door, and shortly thereafter she can hear the sound of a knife trailing over her bedroom door. And she hears a voice say, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember exactly what he says, but he says something like, "Auntie, are you in there?" And that really disturbs her. And then she kind of has a moment where him calling her auntie sort of reminds her that she, she's not an aunt, but her sister is currently pregnant. And so she's starting to understand that not only does the house hold the memories of the past, it's also now holding memories of the future, memories of things that haven't happened yet. And later on in the book, we see this is not the first time that's happened, but it's the first time Sam experiences it, knowingly experiences it. And that was just bone chilling. So at this point, she is seeing the ghost of her nephew that hasn't been born yet. And she knows that he hurts animals. And now he's standing outside her room with a very threatening tone, speaking to her. And I was so scared, you guys. And maybe just hearing me tell you about it doesn't sound that scary, but when you read it, oof. Now, of course, I say this, but I know different things scare different people. So what really scares me might not be what really scares you, but this was a book that really did it for me. Really did it. So other than that, I'll just say before we get into the spoilers that if you love a good haunted house story, a good scary story, this is definitely a book that you would love. It's about family. It's about pain. It's about striving to figure out what the right thing to do in a very difficult situation is. And it kept me on the edge of my seat, quite literally some days. And I could give it 5 stars, like 100%. This is the best horror book I've ever read, which is big words, I know, because there's so many great ones, but I loved this. And Joe Kaplan, I love you. This was so good. I cannot wait to see what you write next. So I'm going to talk about spoilers. So if you do not want those, now's the time to click away. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, you guys, this book is, it's wild. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going to be the thing. I didn't know if eventually we were going to find out that Sam and Elizabeth and her mother were all already dead and were also ghosts in the house. That wasn't it, by the way, which I was so thankful about because I did not want that to be it. I feel like that's a sort of an easy way out, if you will. But instead, that got much sadder, much darker than that. I was telling Ed frantically how it ended, and he was like, oof. It gets dark. So most of the book takes place, just inside this house. As time goes on, Elizabeth gets more and more pregnant. Sam gets more and more terrified about what is going to be born. She's so afraid. She doesn't know, she's trying to figure out, can we change this? Does it have to be like this? And one of the other scenes where we learn that the house has always been showing things that haven't yet happened. There's a room in the house that's locked. It's been locked as far as Sam can remember. Anyway, at one point she sees the ghost of her mother. So she sees a memory play out in front of her eyes of her mother hiding the key to the room. And she just follows that memory to where that memory hid the key, and she gets it. And she lets herself in. And the room is very dingy, very unsettling. And when she's in there, she finds a journal. And she starts reading it, and she finds out that it was her dad's journal. And her dad has been gone for many, many, many years. He died in the house. He took his own life in the house. And as she's reading his journal, it starts out kind of okay, but then it gets really chaotic and really frenzied, and the things he's writing start to make less and less sense to just, a bystander reading it. And we learned that he kept going back to the room. He was drawn to this room. Before he had went into that room, it had been locked, and then it was locked up again after he took his own life. But he kept going back into that room. And as we find out from his journal entries, it was because he kept seeing himself taking his own life in that room. And he can't stop watching it. He can't stop watching it until in the final entry, he realizes, kind of casually, that he's wearing on this one day the same clothes that he's wearing in the memory that he sees played out when he does what he does. And it's just very kind of casual, like, and now's the time when I must actually do it. And he says, it keeps happening again and again, but it only happens once, and now's that time. And then he does it. And that chilled me. That scared me so bad. And then as we get towards the end, because there's a whole other sort of sub-story with a swamp that's nearby, but I'm not going to get into that, just only because we'd be here all day. But anyway, as we get towards the end of the book, Elizabeth goes into labor. Shortly before that, her husband that she separated from had showed up at the front door, and he's now living with them. And he's not a great guy. And they didn't really know that before until they start to learn more about him, and Elizabeth shares more about him. And now nobody really wants him around, but he's in the house and he won't leave. And so Sam begins to think that maybe he's the problem. He's the reason that her nephew, whose name is Julian, when Julian is born, he's the reason that Julian becomes sort of dark and does the things he does. So when Julian is born, as Elizabeth is laying there in the room with their mom and Donovan, he's the dad, he's holding the baby, Sam manages to get the baby from him, and she runs outside. She's like, I just need to get this baby away from him, and then maybe he's going to be okay. And then we learn that it's in that action, in doing that, she's the one that actually now sets into motion the person he's going to become. There's a point where she says, I should have just let him take the baby. We could have dealt with it later. It would have been different. It all would have been different. She ends up getting severe frostbite when she's out with the baby. The baby at one point passes on because of the cold, but then he comes back. For reasons that I won't get into, but he comes back. And so she goes back to the house only to find out that after the baby was born, Elizabeth bled too much and she ended up passing away. So Sam and her mom stay in the house and they raise that baby. Eventually, Sam's mom gets so old that it's time for her to be put into a home, and her mom really thrives. Getting out of the house, getting away from all that energy trapped inside that house, and her mom loves it. She makes new friends. She's living her best life at this point in the old age home. And so now it's Sam and it's Julian stuck together in the house, and he's all of the dark things that she had worried that he would be, and she doesn't know what to do to stop him, and she just kind of lets him do it to her, all of the nasty things he wants to do in terms of hurting her. And there's a moment right at the very end where she realizes that she is on her way to become one of the ghosts that had sort of tormented her in her younger years, because she knows, she can feel in her bones something that Julian's going to do to her. And it involves her eyes. They don't give any details, but she just talks about how she can tell that he doesn't like the way that she looks at him. He doesn't like it. And she fears that he's going to do something about it. And the ghost that had tormented her for so many years was a woman with X's for eyes. And she's like, that was me. And then the final line, there's this revelation where she says, so here's the final paragraph. It's only in hindsight that I've come to realize the truth of it, come to see all my failures over the years made fresh in the memories of the house laid out in a tapestry of disappointment. Each attempted atonement thwarted by the boy who has been to the other side of death and come back as something else. And I know, somewhere deep in my heart, that it wasn't Donovan after all who made him what he is. And so Donovan was her sister's husband, who she worried was going to be the one to make him what he was. And so the implied message here, of course, is that it was actually Sam herself who did it, even though for so many, weeks and months it had been her trying to figure out a way to save him. But in that frantic trying to save him, she's the one that sets it all in motion. If she had just let Donovan take the baby, he would have been fine. This is a book I'm going to be rereading. I know it. I think I'm going to wait and reread it in the fall around Halloween because it was so good. And I just want to reread it at a time when just sort of everything's spooky, and I'm sure it will just sort of elevate that. But if you love scary stories, I cannot recommend this enough. And if you've already read it, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So that's going to do it for me for tonight. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you again real soon. Bye.